God reached me by sending a chaplain to my boarding school who spoke my language. First of all, he would go out with me in the afternoon and we'd play tennis together. Tennis was certainly one of my languages. He'd invite us in his apartment, where he and his wife lived sort of down the end of the hall from where I lived, to watch the original Mission Impossible. Made when Tom Cruise of the current Mission Impossibles was 5 years old. One night, this chaplain, his name's John, invited me out to dinner. It was a Sunday night. Now you gotta understand that being invited out to dinner at a prep school on Sunday night is the best possible language you could possibly get. Because Sunday night is the night of leftovers from a week that wasn't so great to start with. And he told me ahead of time, he said, "Now, I'm taking you out to dinner, and then we're going to come out and speak at the church." I didn't care what his wife was going to do or say. We were going out to dinner. But he'd already gotten to know me, and I appreciated his wife. And then she gave her testimony. She's the kind of person, if you've met her, you said, you know, this is the kind of, she's been sweetness in life her whole life. She's a Sunday school teacher from birth. That kind of person. I was wrong. I won't go into the details of her testimony, but let's just say she had not been a Sunday school teacher for a lot of her adolescence, at least. And in fact, the word reached her just before she was about to commit suicide because she'd been having an affair with a married man as a 19 or 20. And when I heard that testimony of what God had done in her life, all of a sudden I knew there was a living God. And it changed everything. Began the search that ended a few months later. God can change lives. So a couple of thoughts coming out of this passage as I reflect on it. Are we willing to speak the language of the people around us to enter into their lives on their terms? The same question Jim was asking. Listen to what Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians 9. He says, "To the Jews I became like a Jew to win the Jews. To those not having the law, in order to the Gentiles, I became like one not having the law, though I'm not free from God's law, but under Christ's law. So as to win those not having the law. To the weak I became weak to win the weak. I become all things to all men, so that by all possible means I might save some." What does that mean for us? How do we get on people's church? I think bringing people to church is great if we've already entered their life at some other point. God ultimately spoke our language of sending his Son, John 1:14. "The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only who came from the Father, full of grace and truth." John 1:18. "No one has ever seen God, but God, the one and only, who is at the Father's side, has made him known." God spoke our language by showing up in the flesh. So how do we speak to people with the language of people around us? How do we enter into life where they are? I was struck by this quote from Tom Rainer, who is an expert on church growth, and he said this: "The unchurched are likely to be desirous of friendships and lasting relationships. Many of these men and women are very lonely. And while many Christians are reticent or too lazy to get involved in the lives of unchurched persons, such an effort may prove to be the eternal difference in their life. Repeatedly, our research shows that the unchurched are much more likely to accept Christ if a Christian will take the time to get involved in their lives." We have to speak their language. The question for us as churches: how do we change what we do so that more people can hear the gospel? Jim asked the same question. One other note I note from this passage: has to do with one of our top priorities of mission, but one we don't talk about enough. According here to Peter, our first and most important mission field is our children and their friends. This promise is for you and your children, and presumably your children's circles, if you will. And for all who are far off, for all whom the Lord our God will call. Most people make an initial commitment to Christ before they're 12. And then another large group before they're 20. I was in that second group. Their greatest influence is their parents. So how do we disciple parents to disciple their own children? Children also need peer influence. I'm thrilled with the reports this summer from Dynamos and Camp Araminta of the way that student to student were touching each other as well as being touched by those who gave of their time to serve them, and was one. If we win the world and lose our own children because we did not share the gospel with them, we have failed in our most important mission opportunity. Now, we can't make our children believe. That's up to the Lord, and they have free will. But we can make sure that they hear enough to believe. But we also have to figure out how to reach the unchurched, for all who are far off. And some of the far off, as Jim said, are on the other side of the globe, and we have a responsibility of getting the gospel everywhere. But some of the far off are not that far away. 7 out of 10 people in Florida are unchurched. If you have 10 people in a room, odds are 7 of them will not be churchgoers. Well, not girlfriends, I know. There are a lot of lying, unchurched people out there. You ask them where their church is, they'll tell you. They'll name a church that they visited once, or at least passed by. But if you ask them if they know the name of the minister, not a clue. They may have been there once or twice. They just know it's safer to say you have a church. We could plant a new church within a block of every church we already have and have plenty of harvest fields available for both churches. We need church planting, we need Alpha, we need inner-city ministry like Cornerstone. Whatever it takes to speak to people in their own language. We may have to do what may feel like drastic things for us as Anglicans. Things that affect liturgy and music and preaching in order to touch the unchurched. I don't know how that is. I just know that we better be ready to do it. Same question Jim asked. What matters more? The Scriptures, the way that we've always done it. The Lord has already taught us, and I love being here for this today. The Lord has already taught us that we can translate our traditions into new locations and remain Anglicans. If He can teach us that, He can teach us how to speak other languages that reach our culture. But the goal is that the harvest that began at Pentecost would continue. The early harvest started off with the great harvest, which would lead to the final harvest. Jesus still wants people to repent and believe in Him as they hear Him speak their language through us. It's a fabulous word. Father, we thank you that you continually challenge us in your word, and we listen to the pattern of Paul's ministry, the events of the day of Pentecost, and we recognize that there isn't a way in the world that left on our own we could get your gospel out. But you haven't left us on your own, and you've given us your Holy Spirit, and we ask that just as you did 2,000 years ago, you would empower us today to preach your gospel and reach those unreached, to reach our children, to reach those who are far off, to those who are very far off. Be glorified, we pray, in this new adventure together. In Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.